The champagne glasses clinked against each other in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, but the sound felt hollow. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries and worth $500 million, stood in her custom Valentino wedding gown, smiling for the cameras. Her new husband, David Chen, adjusted his tuxedo nervously beside her. Just 18 months earlier, David had been sleeping under a bridge in downtown Seattle, digging through dumpsters for his next meal. The wedding guests whispered among themselves. How does a billionaire tech mogul fall in love with a homeless man? The tabloids called it the romance of the century. Business Weekly dubbed it the ultimate Cinderella story. Forbes questioned whether it was genuine love or an elaborate publicity stunt. They were all wrong. What happened that night in the Sterling Industries boardroom 3 years earlier had set in motion a chain of events so carefully calculated, so methodically planned, that it would take down one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley. Marcus Blackwood thought he had destroyed Victoria Sterling when he stole her life's work and left her empire in ruins. He thought he had won when he married her best friend with the billions he had stolen from her innovations. Marcus had no idea that Victoria Sterling doesn't just get mad. She gets even. And she gets creative. The homeless man she married wasn't just any homeless man. David Chen held 3 MIT degrees, 2 patents in medical technology, and the missing piece to a puzzle that would unravel Marcus Blackwood's entire world. When David whispered something in Victoria's ear during their first dance, Marcus Blackwood, who was watching from across the room with his wife Sarah, felt his blood run cold. Because David had just told Victoria the one secret that could destroy everything Marcus had built on her stolen foundation. This isn't a love story. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of the most sophisticated revenge plot in corporate history, disguised as a wedding. By the time Marcus realized what was happening, it was already too late. The woman he had betrayed had spent 2 years preparing for this moment, and the homeless man she married was about to become his worst nightmare. But the most shocking part. Somewhere between planning revenge and executing justice, Victoria Sterling discovered something she never expected to find. Something that would change the entire game. Welcome to the true story of how a homeless MIT professor helped a billionaire CEO orchestrate the downfall of the man who stole everything from both of them. And how, in the process, they accidentally built something neither of them saw coming. Before we start the story, please like this video, subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. 3 years before that wedding, Victoria Sterling was untouchable. At 32 years old, she had built Sterling Industries from nothing into a $5 billion medical technology empire. Her revolutionary AI diagnostic platform was saving lives in hospitals across 47 countries. The girl who had aged out of foster care at 18, who had worked 3 jobs to put herself through MIT, who had slept in her car during her first startup venture, now commanded boardrooms filled with men twice her age. Victoria's penthouse office on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower in downtown San Francisco overlooked the bay. The walls displayed her achievements: Time magazine's Person of the Year, Forbes' Most Powerful Women in Tech, and patents for innovations that had revolutionized emergency medicine. Her AI system could diagnose rare diseases in minutes instead of months, saving thousands of lives and billions in healthcare costs. But Victoria's greatest achievement wasn't her technology. It was her partnership with Marcus Blackwood. Marcus had been her classmate at MIT, brilliant but lacking her vision. When Victoria needed a business partner to help scale her first medical AI prototype, Marcus seemed like the perfect choice. He understood the technology, had connections in Silicon Valley, and most importantly, he believed in her vision when everyone else called her crazy. Their partnership lasted 7 years. Sterling Industries grew from a 2-person startup in a garage to a Fortune 500 company with 12,000 employees. Marcus handled business development and investor relations while Victoria focused on innovation and product development. They were featured on magazine covers together, spoke at conferences as a team, and were considered one of the most powerful partnerships in tech. Then Marcus proposed. Not just a business merger, but marriage. Victoria said yes because she thought she loved him. She said yes because their partnership had built something extraordinary. She said yes because Marcus knew her better than anyone, understood her work better than anyone, and supported her ambitions when the rest of the world doubted her. She had no idea that Marcus had been planning to destroy her from the moment she said yes. The engagement announcement made headlines. Silicon Valley's power couple, the tech blogs called them. Wedding planning began immediately. Victoria wanted something simple, but Marcus insisted on a grand celebration. "We're not just getting married," he told her. "We're merging two brilliant minds. The world should witness that." Victoria agreed because she trusted him completely. She gave Marcus access to everything: her personal files, her research databases, her patent applications still in development. After 7 years of partnership, it felt natural. They were about to become husband and wife. What was hers would become his anyway. The first sign something was wrong came 6 weeks before their wedding. Victoria arrived at the office to find FBI agents in her lobby. Sterling Industries was under investigation for intellectual property theft. Specifically, her flagship AI diagnostic system was allegedly built on stolen code from a German medical technology company called MedTech Solutions. Victoria was confused. She had developed every line of that code herself, working 18-hour days for 3 years. But when the investigators showed her the evidence, her confusion turned to horror. The stolen code wasn't in her system. It was in Marcus's backup files, files that had been uploaded to Sterling Industries servers using Victoria's personal access credentials. Someone had planted evidence to make it look like Victoria had stolen the technology that made her company successful. Someone with access to her personal accounts, her development files, and her backup systems. Someone who knew exactly how to make the theft look authentic. Someone like Marcus. But that was just the beginning. While Victoria was dealing with the FBI investigation, Marcus was making his real move. Using his authority as co-founder and Victoria's fiancé, he accessed Sterling Industries' most sensitive files. The next-generation AI platform Victoria had been developing in secret, worth potentially $20 billion, was copied onto external drives. Patent applications were duplicated. Source code was downloaded. 7 years of Victoria's life's work was systematically stolen. Then Marcus disappeared. Not physically. He still showed up to the office, still attended meetings, still planned their wedding. But Victoria noticed changes. He was distant during strategy sessions. He deflected questions about the FBI investigation. He insisted on postponing their wedding until this legal mess gets sorted out. Victoria's assistant found the truth by accident. A misfiled email showed Marcus had been in contact with MedTech Solutions for 8 months. Not about intellectual property theft. About a business deal. Marcus was selling Sterling Industries technology to the German company, the same company that was now accusing Victoria of stealing from them. The setup was masterful. Marcus had stolen Victoria's innovations, sold them to MedTech Solutions, then helped MedTech plant false evidence to make it look like Victoria had stolen from them. When the lawsuit concluded, MedTech would own Victoria's technology legally, and Marcus would own it financially through his secret partnership with the German company. Victoria confronted Marcus on a Thursday evening in September. She had prepared for weeks, gathering evidence, consulting lawyers, building her case. She thought she was ready for his denial, his explanations, his attempts to turn the situation around. She wasn't ready for his laughter. "You actually thought I loved you?" Marcus said, sitting behind Victoria's own desk in her office, feet propped up like he owned the place. "Victoria, you're brilliant with technology, but you're absolutely clueless about people." The cruelty in his voice was something Victoria had never heard before. This wasn't the man who had proposed to her, who had built a company with her, who had shared her dreams for 7 years. This was someone else entirely. "I've been planning this since our 2nd year of partnership," Marcus continued. "Do you remember when you first showed me the AI diagnostic prototype? I realized then that you were going to make billions, and I was going to be nothing more than your business manager. So I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning." Victoria stood frozen, listening to the man she thought she knew explain how he had systematically destroyed her life. "The FBI investigation was my idea. I've been feeding medtech information about your development process for months, helping them build a case that you stole their technology. When this lawsuit finishes, they'll own your patents, and I'll own 40% of medtech. Your life's work becomes my retirement fund. But Marcus wasn't finished. And Sarah sends her regards, by the way. Sarah Chen, Victoria's best friend since college, her maid of honor, the person she had confided in about every doubt, every fear, every private moment of their relationship. Sarah had been helping Marcus plan the betrayal from the beginning, feeding him information about Victoria's insecurities, her business strategies, even her therapy sessions. We're getting married next month in Cabo, Marcus said, pulling out his phone to show Victoria wedding planning photos. Thanks for the ring design inspiration, by the way. Sarah loved the setting you picked out. The engagement ring Victoria had helped design for herself was now on Sarah's finger. That night, Victoria Sterling lost everything. The FBI seized Sterling Industries' assets pending the intellectual property investigation. The board of directors, led by investors Marcus had been secretly influencing for months, voted to remove Victoria as CEO. Her personal assets were frozen as part of the federal investigation. Her friends, except for the few who weren't part of Marcus and Sarah's social circle, distanced themselves from the scandal. Within 6 weeks, Victoria went from commanding a $5 billion empire to sleeping on her lawyer's office couch, unable to afford her own apartment. But Marcus had made one critical mistake in his perfect plan. He had forgotten that Victoria Sterling had built her entire life around solving impossible problems. And he had just given her the most important problem she would ever need to solve. 6 months after Marcus destroyed her life, Victoria Sterling was volunteering at the Compass Housing Alliance in downtown Seattle. Not because she wanted to help. Because she needed somewhere to sleep. Her lawyer had suggested the volunteer work as part of her image rehabilitation strategy. Show the world you're giving back, he said. Demonstrate character during adversity. It will help when we rebuild your reputation. Victoria didn't care about her reputation anymore. She cared about survival. The homeless shelter provided meals for volunteers, had warm showers, and offered a safe place to spend her evenings while she figured out how to rebuild her life from nothing. Again. She had been volunteering for 3 weeks when she met David Chen. David was organizing donated electronics in the shelter's backroom, carefully sorting old computers and phones that might still be useful. Victoria noticed immediately that he wasn't just randomly organizing, he was testing each device, checking specifications, determining actual functionality rather than just appearance. You know technology, Victoria said, watching him efficiently diagnose a laptop that other volunteers had assumed was broken. I used to, David replied, not looking up from his work. Over the following weeks, Victoria learned David's story in pieces. He had been a professor at MIT, specializing in biomedical engineering. His research focused on affordable medical technology for underserved communities, exactly the kind of innovation Victoria had built her career on. David had held 2 patents for diagnostic equipment that could function in areas without reliable electricity or internet access. Then his wife Michelle was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. David spent their savings on her treatment. When that wasn't enough, he mortgaged their house. When that wasn't enough, he sold his patents to a medical device company for a fraction of their value, just to pay for one more round of experimental treatment. When that wasn't enough, he borrowed against his MIT pension. Michelle died anyway, 2 years after her diagnosis, on a Tuesday morning in March. David was left with $400,000 in medical debt, no house, no patents, and no job. MIT had eliminated his position during budget cuts while he was on medical leave caring for his wife. I went from tenured professor to homeless in 18 months, David told Victoria one evening as they sorted through donated winter coats. Turns out our healthcare system can destroy anyone, no matter how educated or prepared you think you are. Victoria started looking forward to her shifts at the shelter, not because of the volunteer work, but because of her conversations with David. He was brilliant, funny, and had a perspective on technology that challenged her thinking. More importantly, he didn't know who she was. To David, she was just Victoria, another volunteer trying to help out. He had no idea he was talking to the former CEO of Sterling Industries. It was David who first gave Victoria the idea for revenge. "The worst part isn't being homeless," David said one evening as they prepared dinner for 50 people. "The worst part is knowing that the people who destroyed your life are out there somewhere, successful and happy, never thinking about the damage they caused." Victoria looked at David, brilliant, kind, destroyed by circumstances beyond his control, and thought about Marcus and Sarah, probably planning their honeymoon with money stolen from her life's work. What if they weren't successful and happy? Victoria asked. What if there was a way to make them face the consequences of what they did? David smiled, the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from him. "I'd say that sounds like a plan worth making." Neither of them realized they were about to become partners in the most sophisticated revenge plot in corporate history. Victoria told David the truth on a Friday night in December, 6 months after Marcus had destroyed her life. They were closing the shelter's computer lab, a small room where homeless individuals could search for jobs, fill out government assistance applications, and stay connected with family. "I know who you are," David said quietly, shutting down the last computer. "I figured it out 3 weeks ago." Victoria felt her stomach drop. Her anonymity at the shelter was the only peace she had found since losing everything. "I saw your picture in an old technology review magazine," David continued. "The article was about breakthrough medical AI technology. Your AI diagnostic system saved my wife's life twice, once when it caught a secondary infection her doctors missed, and once when it identified a drug interaction that could have killed her." Victoria stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Your technology gave Michelle 6 extra months with me," David said. "Good months, where she wasn't in constant pain, where we could travel and laugh and pretend everything was normal. So when I recognized you volunteering at a homeless shelter, I knew something terrible must have happened." That night, Victoria told David everything. Marcus's betrayal, Sarah's collaboration, the systematic theft of her life's work, the legal manipulation that had destroyed her company and her reputation. David listened without interruption, occasionally asking technical questions about the stolen patents and the FBI investigation. When Victoria finished, David was quiet for several minutes. "I want to show you something," he finally said. David led Victoria to a storage room in the shelter's basement. Hidden behind boxes of donated clothes, he had set up a makeshift laboratory using donated electronics and equipment salvaged from the shelter's computer lab. On a table made from stacked cardboard boxes, David had built a functioning prototype of a medical diagnostic device. "I've been working on this for 8 months, David explained. "It's based on the patents I sold to pay for Michelle's treatment, but improved. This version can run comprehensive diagnostics using just a smartphone and some basic sensors. It could provide hospital-quality medical screening in homeless shelters, refugee camps, rural areas, anywhere that doesn't have access to advanced medical technology." Victoria examined the device. The engineering was brilliant, but more than that, it was elegant. David had solved problems that Victoria's team at Sterling Industries had struggled with for years. "This is revolutionary," Victoria said. "This could help millions of people." "That's the plan," David replied. "But I can't manufacture it, can't get patents, can't even get investors to take a meeting with a homeless former professor. I have the ideas, but no way to make them real." Victoria looked at David's prototype, then back at him. "What if you did have a way?" she asked. Over the next 4 hours, Victoria and David developed the framework for a plan that would serve 3 purposes: destroy Marcus Blackwood, restore both of their careers, and help millions of underserved people access quality healthcare. The plan was audacious, complex, and would require perfect timing. It would also require David to trust Victoria completely, and Victoria to trust David completely, despite the fact that they had only known each other for 3 months. "There's one more thing," Victoria said as they finished outlining their strategy. "For this to work, we need Marcus to believe he's winning right up until the moment he loses everything. That means the revenge can't look like revenge. It has to look like love." David understood immediately what she was suggesting. "You want me to marry you," he said. "I want us to marry each other," Victoria corrected. Partners in every sense. Business, legal, and personal. Because what we're about to do is going to require absolute trust, and marriage is the strongest legal bond we can create. David was quiet for a long moment. Will it be real? He asked. Or just strategic? Victoria looked at this brilliant, kind man who had lost everything and was still trying to help people, who had recognized her but hadn't betrayed her anonymity, who had spent 8 months building revolutionary technology in a homeless shelter basement. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'd like to find out. David smiled. Then let's get married and destroy Marcus Blackwood. Victoria and David's engagement was announced 6 months after they met, 18 months after Marcus had destroyed Victoria's life. The announcement made headlines worldwide. Fallen tech mogul Victoria Sterling engaged to homeless MIT professor, read the Wall Street Journal headline. From rags to riches, the ultimate Silicon Valley love story, proclaimed TechCrunch. Billionaire CEO finds love at rock bottom, announced People magazine. The media narrative was perfect for their plan. Victoria Sterling, the disgraced former CEO, had found love and redemption with a brilliant but unfortunate academic who had also been destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. It was a story of two people rebuilding their lives together, supporting each other through adversity. Marcus Blackwood read every article. Victoria knew he was watching because David had designed a sophisticated digital monitoring system that tracked every mention of their engagement across news sites, social media, and even private online forums. Marcus was obsessed with their story, searching for information about David, trying to understand how his former fiancée had moved on so completely. What Marcus didn't know was that David and Victoria were using his obsession against him. Every public appearance, every interview, every social media post was carefully calculated to make Marcus believe Victoria had given up on revenge and moved on to building a new life. They portrayed themselves as grateful for their circumstances, thankful that their individual tragedies had brought them together, focused on the future rather than the past. Meanwhile, they were rebuilding Victoria's empire from scratch. Using David's revolutionary diagnostic technology as the foundation, Victoria formed a new company, Sterling Medical Technologies. She invested the small amount of personal assets she had managed to protect from the FBI investigation, while David contributed his patents and continued research. But their real advantage was something Marcus couldn't monitor or understand. They were building their technology to be better than what he had stolen. David's years of research in affordable medical technology, combined with Victoria's experience in AI development, created innovations that surpassed everything Victoria had built at Sterling Industries. Their new diagnostic platform wasn't just more accurate than the system Marcus had stolen, it was more affordable, more accessible, and more versatile. We're not just getting revenge, Victoria explained to David as they worked 18-hour days in their new laboratory space. We're making his stolen technology obsolete. The FBI investigation into Sterling Industries concluded after 14 months. As Marcus had planned, MedTech Solutions was awarded ownership of Victoria's original patents, while Victoria was cleared of criminal charges but remained financially ruined from legal fees and the destruction of her company. Marcus celebrated by proposing to Sarah in a $50,000 per night suite at the Four Seasons in Paris, posting photos on social media of the custom 10-carat diamond ring he had bought with profits from Victoria's stolen technology. Victoria and David celebrated by filing their first patent application for technology that would make Marcus's stolen innovations look like toys. But they needed funding, credibility, and market access to compete with Marcus's new empire. David's brilliant technology wasn't enough on its own. They needed to convince investors, hospitals, and government agencies to trust two people who had both lost everything. That's when Victoria realized they needed to make their marriage more than just a strategic alliance. They needed to make it the biggest story in Silicon Valley. Victoria and David's wedding was scheduled for a Saturday evening in March, exactly 2 years after Victoria had lost everything. The venue was the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco, the same hotel where Victoria had celebrated Sterling Industries' IPO 5 years earlier. But this wasn't just a wedding. It was the opening move in the final phase of their revenge plan. The guest list was carefully curated to serve multiple purposes. Every major technology investor in Silicon Valley received an invitation. Every journalist who had covered Victoria's downfall was invited to witness her comeback. Every former Sterling Industries employee who had remained loyal to Victoria was invited to see her vindication. And Marcus Blackwood received an invitation as well. Victoria knew he would come. His ego wouldn't allow him to miss the opportunity to see his former fiancée marry a homeless man in what he assumed was a desperate attempt to rebuild her reputation. Marcus would want to witness what he believed was Victoria's acceptance of defeat. The wedding preparations became a media spectacle. Victoria's dress was designed by Valentino, donated by the fashion house in exchange for publicity around the comeback love story. The flowers were arranged by the same designer who had handled state dinners at the White House. The music was performed by a string quartet from the San Francisco Symphony. Every detail was calculated to send a message: Victoria Sterling was not defeated. She was returning to power, and she was bringing David Chen with her. But the real preparation was happening behind the scenes. David had spent 18 months developing not just new technology, but a comprehensive business strategy that would revolutionize how medical diagnostics were delivered to underserved populations. His system could provide hospital-quality screening using equipment that cost less than a smartphone and could operate anywhere in the world. Victoria had spent the same 18 months rebuilding her network, reconnecting with investors who had believed in her original vision, and developing partnerships with medical organizations that needed David's technology. Together, they had created a company that was ready to launch the day after their wedding, with funding, partnerships, and technology that would immediately make them competitive with the largest medical technology companies in the world, including the company Marcus had built on Victoria's stolen innovations. The night before the wedding, Victoria and David made their final preparations in the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton. "Are you ready for this?" Victoria asked, looking out at the San Francisco skyline where Sterling Industries' former headquarters still displayed the company logo that Marcus now controlled. "I've been ready for 2 years," David replied. "The question is, are you ready to destroy the man who destroyed your life?" Victoria smiled, thinking about Marcus sitting somewhere in the city, probably planning what he would say to her at the wedding reception, probably practicing the condescending congratulations he would offer about her new beginning. "I'm ready to show him what a real new beginning looks like," she said. The wedding ceremony was flawless. Victoria walked down the aisle in her custom Valentino gown, past 300 guests who represented the most powerful people in Silicon Valley technology, investment, and media. David waited at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the successful academic, rather than the homeless man he had been 18 months earlier. Marcus Blackwood sat in the 5th row, next to his wife Sarah, both of them dressed impeccably and smiling politely. To outside observers, they looked like gracious former friends attending their ex-partner's wedding. Only Victoria noticed the tension in Marcus's jaw, the way his hands clenched slightly when David and Victoria exchanged vows. The ceremony itself was traditional, elegant, and deeply emotional. When Victoria and David promised to support each other through adversity, to trust each other completely, and to build a future together based on shared values and mutual respect, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even Marcus seemed moved by the sincerity of their vows. What Marcus didn't know was that every word of those vows was true, and that the future Victoria and David were promising to build together was going to destroy everything Marcus had stolen. The reception began with dinner and dancing. Victoria and David moved through the crowd, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, and gradually building toward the moment they had planned for 2 years. Marcus approached them during the cocktail hour. "Victoria," he said, extending his hand with practiced charm. "Congratulations. You look beautiful." "Thank you, Marcus," Victoria replied graciously. "I'm so glad you could come. I'd like you to meet my husband, David Chen." David shook Marcus's hand with a firm grip. "I've heard so much about you," David said. "Victoria's told me all about your work together at Sterling Industries." "Ancient history," Marcus replied smoothly. "I'm much more interested in hearing about your work, Dr. Chen. Victoria tells me you're developing medical technology for underserved communities." "Actually," David said, "I'd love to show you something." This was the moment Victoria and David had prepared for. David pulled out his smartphone and opened an application that connected to a small device he carried in his jacket pocket. "This is a prototype diagnostic system I've been developing," David explained, running the device over his own wrist. Within seconds, the smartphone displayed a comprehensive medical analysis: heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen levels, blood sugar, cholesterol, and indicators for 12 common medical conditions. "Impressive," Marcus said, though Victoria could see he was calculating how this technology might compete with his own medical AI systems. "The interesting part," David continued, "is that this device costs less than $50 to manufacture and can provide diagnostic accuracy comparable to equipment that costs $50,000. Marcus's expression changed slightly. $50,000 diagnostic equipment was exactly what his company sold to hospitals worldwide. "More importantly," David said, meeting Marcus's eyes directly, "the core algorithm is based on research I did at MIT, combined with some innovations Victoria and I developed together. We think it could revolutionize medical care in developing countries, refugee camps, homeless shelters, anywhere that traditional medical infrastructure isn't available." Marcus was no longer smiling. "That sounds like a very ambitious project," he said carefully. "It is," Victoria interjected. "Which is why we're launching Sterling Chin Medical Technologies on Monday morning, with $50 million in initial funding and partnerships with Doctors Without Borders, the World Health Organization, and the Gates Foundation." Marcus stared at Victoria, processing what she had just told him. "We've also filed patents for the core technology," David added casually. 17 patents, actually, covering every aspect of affordable diagnostic systems. The applications were submitted this morning. Victoria watched Marcus's face as he realized what was happening. Sterling Chin Medical Technologies wasn't just a feel-good startup helping poor people. It was a direct competitor to his medical technology empire, built on superior technology, with major funding and partnerships already in place. "I should go find Sarah," Marcus said abruptly. "Congratulations again." As Marcus walked away, Victoria felt David take her hand. "How do you think he's feeling right now?" David asked quietly. "Confused," Victoria replied. "But not worried yet. He still thinks his stolen technology gives him an insurmountable advantage." "When will he realize the truth?" Victoria smiled, watching Marcus whisper urgently to Sarah across the room. "Monday morning, when our technology demonstration makes headlines worldwide and investors realize that everything he stole from me is about to become obsolete." But Victoria was wrong about the timeline. Marcus realized the truth 15 minutes later, when David made his toast to their wedding guests. David stood up at the head table, champagne glass in hand, and asked for the room's attention. The 300 wedding guests quieted down, expecting the traditional groom's speech thanking everyone for coming and expressing his love for his new wife. Instead, David began telling the story of how he and Victoria had met. 18 months ago, I was living in a homeless shelter," David said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "I had lost my wife to cancer, lost my house to medical debt, lost my career to budget cuts, and lost hope that my life would ever have meaning again." Victoria watched the guests' faces as David spoke. Most of them knew the basic story from media coverage, but hearing David tell it personally, with such raw honesty, was clearly affecting them deeply. "Then I met Victoria at the Compass Housing Alliance, where she was volunteering. I didn't know who she was at first. To me, she was just another volunteer trying to help people who had lost everything." Marcus was staring at David intently now, no longer whispering to Sarah. "Over the months we worked together, Victoria and I discovered we had something in common beyond our volunteer work. We had both dedicated our careers to developing medical technology that could help people who couldn't afford traditional healthcare." David paused, looking directly at Victoria. "Victoria's AI diagnostic system had actually saved my wife's life twice during her cancer treatment. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that the woman whose technology had given me 6 extra months with Michelle was now serving meals beside me in a homeless shelter." The room was completely silent now. This wasn't the inspirational comeback story the guests had expected. This was something deeper and more complex. As we got to know each other, Victoria and I realized that our individual tragedies had given us a unique opportunity. My research in affordable medical technology, combined with Victoria's expertise in AI development, could create innovations that would help millions of people worldwide who don't have access to quality healthcare. David picked up his smartphone and held it up for the guests to see. This device represents 2 years of collaboration between Victoria and me. It can provide hospital-quality medical diagnostics anywhere in the world, using equipment that costs less than most people spend on coffee in a month. Several guests pulled out their phones to record David's demonstration as he ran the diagnostic device over his wrist and displayed the results on the ballroom's projection screens. But the real breakthrough isn't the technology itself, David continued. It's what this technology can do for people who have been forgotten by our healthcare system. The projection screens now showed a presentation David and Victoria had prepared, featuring photos and videos from their field testing of the diagnostic system in homeless shelters, refugee camps, and rural clinics around the world. Over the past year, Victoria and I have tested this technology in 47 different locations worldwide. We've provided medical screening for over 10,000 people who had no other access to healthcare. We've diagnosed everything from diabetes to heart disease to cancer, often catching conditions early enough to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. Victoria could see Marcus's face clearly now. He had gone pale, and his hands were gripping his champagne glass so tightly his knuckles were white. Tomorrow morning, Sterling Medical Technologies will begin shipping these diagnostic systems to medical organizations in 38 countries. Our goal is to provide medical screening for 1 million underserved people within the first year. The guests burst into applause, but David wasn't finished. I want to thank everyone who has supported Victoria and me through this journey. Our investors, who believed in our vision when we had nothing but ideas and determination. Our partners at major medical organizations, who trusted us to develop technology that could serve their missions. And most importantly, the people who tested our technology in the field, who helped us understand what communities really need from medical innovation. David paused again, looking around the room. But there's one more person I need to thank. Someone who inadvertently helped make all of this possible. Victoria felt her heart rate increase. This wasn't part of their planned presentation. 3 years ago, someone made a decision that destroyed Victoria's first company and forced both of us to rebuild our lives from nothing. At the time, that decision felt like the end of everything we had worked for. Marcus was staring at David with obvious panic now. But that destruction forced Victoria and me to think differently about what we wanted to achieve with medical technology. Instead of building systems for hospitals that could afford expensive equipment, we were forced to develop technology for people who have nothing. David raised his champagne glass toward Marcus. So I want to thank Marcus Blackwood for destroying Victoria's first company. Because without that destruction, we never would have built something better. The entire ballroom turned to look at Marcus, who sat frozen in his chair as 300 of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley stared at him. Marcus, your theft of Victoria's original technology taught us that the most important innovations aren't the ones that make the most money. They're the ones that help the most people. So thank you for that lesson. David turned back to the crowd. Tomorrow, Sterling Medical Technologies will prove that sometimes the greatest success comes from the ashes of the greatest failure. And sometimes the best revenge is building something so much better than what was stolen that the theft becomes irrelevant. As the guests erupted into applause again, Victoria watched Marcus grab Sarah's arm and rush toward the exit. But Marcus was too late to escape what was coming next. Marcus and Sarah made it as far as the hotel lobby before David's final surprise caught up with them. As Marcus waited for the valet to bring his car, his phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, emails, news alerts, social media mentions, all arriving simultaneously as if someone had just released a flood of information to every major media outlet in the world. The first headline appeared on Marcus's phone at 9:47 p.m. Breaking. New medical technology makes stolen Sterling Industries patents obsolete. The second headline followed 30 seconds later. Sterling Medical Technologies launches revolutionary healthcare platform. By 9:50 p.m., Marcus's phone had received 47 news alerts, and the story was trending on every social media platform. Victoria and David had timed their announcement to coincide with the end of David's wedding toast. While Marcus was rushing out of the ballroom, major news outlets were simultaneously publishing detailed articles about Sterlington Medical Technologies, complete with technical specifications, demonstration videos, and interviews with medical professionals who had tested the technology in the field. But the news coverage wasn't just about Sterlington's innovative technology. The articles also detailed the complete history of Marcus's theft of Victoria's original innovations, the FBI investigation that had cleared Victoria of wrongdoing, and the legal machinations Marcus had used to destroy Sterling Industries while enriching himself. Marcus stood in the hotel lobby, reading headline after headline that systematically destroyed his reputation. How Marcus Blackwood stole billions from his business partner and fiancé. The corporate theft that inspired revolutionary medical innovation. From betrayal to breakthrough, Victoria Sterling's ultimate revenge. MedTech Solutions under investigation for receiving stolen technology. Sarah read the articles over Marcus's shoulder, her face growing paler with each revelation. "You told me Victoria stole technology from MedTech," Sarah whispered. "You said she was the criminal." Marcus didn't respond. He was reading an article that included financial documents showing his secret ownership stake in MedTech Solutions, emails detailing his coordination with German executives to frame Victoria for intellectual property theft, and bank records proving he had profited from the destruction of Sterling Industries. But the most damaging article was published by Forbes at 9:52 p.m. Sterlington Medical Technologies valued at $2 billion after revolutionary healthcare breakthrough. The article explained that David and Victoria's diagnostic technology was so advanced, so affordable, and so accessible that it would immediately make existing medical diagnostic equipment obsolete. Major investors were already committing hundreds of millions of dollars to help Sterlington scale their technology globally. Meanwhile, the technology Marcus had stolen from Victoria's original company was now worthless. His partnership with MedTech Solutions was under federal investigation. His reputation in Silicon Valley was destroyed. And Victoria Sterling had just become more powerful than she had ever been before Marcus betrayed her. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed his lawyer's name. "Marcus, where are you?" his lawyer said without preamble. "The FBI wants to interview you about the MedTech Solutions partnership. There are documents suggesting you orchestrated the intellectual property theft case against Victoria Sterling." Marcus hung up the phone and looked at Sarah. "We need to leave," he said. "Tonight. We need to get out of the country before this gets worse." But Sarah was staring at her own phone, reading social media posts from their mutual friends, colleagues, and business associates. Everyone who had supported Marcus during Victoria's downfall was now distancing themselves from him as quickly as possible. "I can't do this," Sarah said quietly. "I can't be married to someone who destroyed his best friend's life for money." She removed her wedding ring and handed it to Marcus. "Find your own way home," she said, and walked out of the hotel lobby, leaving Marcus alone with the ruins of everything he had built on Victoria's stolen foundation. Upstairs in the ballroom, Victoria and David were still celebrating with their wedding guests, but the celebration had transformed into something much larger than a wedding reception. Investors were making offers, medical organizations were discussing partnerships, and journalists were requesting interviews about Sterlington Medical Technologies. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You won. Are you happy now?" She showed the message to David. "Marcus?" he asked. "Marcus," Victoria confirmed. David considered this for a moment. "Are you happy now?" he asked Victoria. Victoria looked around the ballroom at 300 people celebrating not just her wedding, but the launch of a company that would help millions of underserved people access quality healthcare. She thought about the homeless shelters, refugee camps, and rural clinics where their technology would save lives. She thought about David, brilliant and kind, who had become her true partner in every sense. "I'm not happy because Marcus lost everything," Victoria said. "I'm happy because we built something better than anything I could have imagined when I was planning revenge." David smiled and kissed his new wife. "So what happens next?" he asked. Victoria looked out at the San Francisco skyline, where Sterling Industries' former headquarters would soon be replaced by Sterlington Medical Technologies' new building. Next, we change the world, she said. The Sterlington Medical Technologies headquarters occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in downtown San Francisco, just 4 blocks from where Sterling Industries had once been located. Victoria's new office had the same view of the bay, but everything else was different. Instead of awards and patents covering the walls, Victoria's office displayed photos from field deployments of their diagnostic technology, a refugee camp in Jordan where their system had diagnosed a cholera outbreak before it could spread, a rural clinic in Kenya where it had detected malaria in pregnant women, a homeless shelter in Detroit where it had identified diabetes in veterans who hadn't seen a doctor in years. Sterlington Medical Technologies had exceeded every projection from their business plan. In 6 months, they had deployed diagnostic systems to medical organizations in 53 countries. Their technology had provided medical screening for over 800,000 people who had no other access to healthcare. They had diagnosed over 15,000 serious medical conditions early enough to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. The company was valued at $3.2 billion and employed over 2,000 people worldwide. David had an office next to Victoria's, where he continued developing new innovations while overseeing the company's research and development division. His latest project was a diagnostic system that could be built into smartphones, making medical screening as accessible as taking a photograph. But the most important change wasn't in their technology or their business success. It was in their relationship. Somewhere between planning revenge and building a global healthcare company, Victoria and David had fallen genuinely in love. Their marriage, which had begun as a strategic alliance, had become the foundation for both their personal happiness and their professional partnership. Any regrets? David asked Victoria one evening as they worked late in their offices, reviewing deployment reports from medical teams around the world. About which part? Victoria replied. Getting revenge on Marcus, building this company, or marrying you? Any of it. All of it. Victoria considered the question seriously. 6 months earlier, she had been focused entirely on destroying Marcus Blackwood. Now, she rarely thought about him at all. I regret that it took losing everything for me to understand what was really important, Victoria said. I spent 7 years building Sterling Industries to prove I could be successful. I spent 2 years building Sterlington to help people who needed it most. The second approach turned out to be much more fulfilling. David nodded. I regret that it took Michelle's death for me to understand that the most important innovations are the ones that help people who have been forgotten by everyone else. They were interrupted by Victoria's assistant, who knocked on the office door. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, but there's someone here to see you. He says his name is Marcus Blackwood. Victoria and David exchanged glances. Send him in, Victoria said. Marcus Blackwood looked different than he had at their wedding 6 months earlier. His expensive suit had been replaced by jeans and a simple shirt. His confident demeanor had been replaced by obvious nervousness. Most noticeably, he looked tired in a way that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well for months. Hello, Victoria. Dr. Chen, Marcus said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Marcus, Victoria replied neutrally. I heard about the FBI investigation. And the divorce. I'm sorry. Marcus had indeed lost everything. The federal investigation into his theft of Victoria's technology had resulted in criminal charges. MedTech Solutions had terminated their partnership and sued him for fraud. His assets had been frozen pending the resolution of multiple lawsuits. Sarah had divorced him and returned to her maiden name. I deserved all of it, Marcus said quietly. I came here to apologize, not to ask for anything. Victoria studied Marcus's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. She found none. Why now? She asked. Because I've spent 6 months watching what you built with Sterlington, and I finally understand what I destroyed when I stole your work, Marcus said. Your original company was about proving you could be successful. This company is about helping people who need it most. I destroyed the first one out of jealousy, but I could never have built the second one because I didn't understand what really mattered. Marcus paused, looking around Victoria's office at the photos from medical deployments worldwide. I saw the news coverage about your diagnostic system preventing that cholera outbreak in Jordan. Thousands of people are alive because of technology you and Dr. Chen developed. I spent 3 years profiting from innovations that helped rich hospitals get richer. You spent 6 months creating innovations that are saving lives in refugee camps. David spoke for the first time since Marcus had entered the office. What do you want, Marcus? I want to know if there's any way I can help, Marcus said. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I have 7 years of experience in medical technology business development, and I'm facing potential prison time anyway. If there's any way I can contribute to what you're building here, I'd like to try to do something meaningful with whatever time I have left. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, considering Marcus's offer. The cholera outbreak in Jordan, she finally said. How did you know about that? I've been following every news story about Sterlington for 6 months, Marcus admitted. At first because I was angry about losing everything. But lately because I'm amazed by what you're accomplishing. Victoria looked at David, who nodded slightly. We have a deployment next month in refugee camps along the Syrian border, Victoria said. Medical organizations estimate there are 200,000 people in those camps who haven't had medical screening in over 2 years. It's dangerous work, with complex logistics, and we need someone who understands international medical technology regulations. Marcus looked surprised. You'd trust me with that? I'd trust you with supervised probation and a chance to prove that people can change, Victoria corrected. David and I believe that everyone deserves an opportunity for redemption, even people who have made terrible choices. Marcus was quiet for several seconds. Why? He asked. After everything I did to you, why would you give me a second chance? Victoria smiled, thinking about her conversation with David on their wedding night about building something better than what had been stolen. Because the best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you, she said. It's helping them become someone better than the person who hurt you in the first place. The auditorium at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva was packed with representatives from medical organizations, government health agencies, and humanitarian groups from around the world. Victoria Sterlington stood at the podium, delivering the keynote address at the Global Health Innovation Summit. 2 years ago, Sterlington Medical Technologies deployed our first diagnostic systems with a goal of providing medical screening for 1 million underserved people worldwide, Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the large auditorium. Today, I'm proud to announce that our technology has now provided medical screening for over 5 million people in 87 countries. The audience erupted in applause. But numbers only tell part of the story, Victoria continued. The real story is in the lives that have been saved, the diseases that have been caught early, and the communities that now have access to medical care they never had before. The presentation screen behind Victoria displayed photos and videos from Sterlington deployments around the world. Children receiving vaccinations in rural clinics, elderly patients getting heart disease screening in urban shelters, pregnant women accessing prenatal care in refugee camps. Our diagnostic technology has identified over 50,000 serious medical conditions that would otherwise have gone undiagnosed. We estimate that early detection has saved over 8,000 lives in the past 2 years alone. More applause filled the auditorium. But I want to share something more important than our statistics, Victoria said. I want to talk about the team that made this possible. Victoria gestured to the side of the stage, where David was sitting with other Sterlington executives. Dr. David Chen, our Chief Innovation Officer, developed the core technology that makes our diagnostic systems possible. But more than that, he taught our entire company that the most important innovations are the ones that help people who have been forgotten by everyone else. David stood and waved to the audience. Our deployment teams, led by Dr. Sarah Martinez, have worked in some of the most challenging conditions on Earth to bring medical screening to communities that had no other options. Sarah, Victoria's former best friend who had rejoined her life and work after divorcing Marcus, stood and acknowledged the applause. And our business development team, led by Marcus Blackwood, has navigated complex international regulations and partnerships to make our global deployments possible. Marcus stood from his seat in the audience. He looked healthier than he had 2 years earlier, and there was a genuine smile on his face as he acknowledged the recognition. After his criminal trial had concluded with a suspended sentence and community service requirement, Marcus had spent 18 months working with Sterlington's deployment teams in refugee camps and disaster zones around the world. The experience had transformed him from someone who viewed medical technology as a business opportunity into someone who understood it as a humanitarian necessity. But the most important lesson I've learned over the past 2 years, Victoria said, is that the greatest success comes not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into allies in building something better than any of you could have built alone. Victoria paused, looking out at the audience of global health leaders. Sterlington Medical Technologies began as a story of revenge. A homeless MIT professor and a disgraced CEO decided to get back at the people who had destroyed their lives. But somewhere in the process of planning that revenge, we discovered something more important than justice. The auditorium was completely silent now. We discovered that the most powerful response to betrayal isn't destruction. It's creation. The most effective response to theft isn't punishment. It's innovation. And the most meaningful response to being forgotten is to make sure no one else gets forgotten. Victoria clicked to her final slide, which showed a world map displaying every location where Sterlington technology was currently saving lives. Today, Sterlington Medical Technologies employs over 12,000 people worldwide. Our diagnostic systems are operating in 93 countries. We've provided medical screening for over 5 million people who had no other access to healthcare. The applause began building again. But our real success isn't measured in employees or countries or even lives saved. Our real success is measured in the fact that a story which began with theft, betrayal, and revenge became a story about innovation, redemption, and hope. Victoria looked directly at Marcus in the audience. Sometimes the people who hurt us most become the people who help us build something we never could have built without them. Sometimes the greatest disasters become the foundation for the greatest achievements. And sometimes the best revenge is to stop seeking revenge and start building something so meaningful that the original injury becomes irrelevant. As the audience rose in a standing ovation, Victoria thought about the homeless shelter where she and David had first met, the conversation that had started their partnership, and the wedding toast that had launched their company. She thought about Marcus, now genuinely committed to helping underserved communities access medical care. She thought about Sarah, who had returned to her life as a trusted friend and colleague. She thought about the millions of people around the world who had received medical screening because of technology that had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. Most of all, she thought about David, brilliant and kind, who had taught her that the most powerful revenge wasn't destroying the person who hurt you, but building something so much better than what they had stolen that their theft became the foundation for something they never could have imagined. After the presentation, Victoria and David walked through the streets of Geneva, holding hands and talking about their next innovations, their next deployments, their next opportunities to help people who needed it most. Any regrets? David asked, the same question he had asked 2 years earlier. Victoria smiled, thinking about the long journey from homelessness to global success, from revenge to redemption, from strategic alliance to genuine love. Just one, she said. I regret that it took me so long to understand that the best victories are the ones where everyone wins. David squeezed her hand. Even Marcus? Especially Marcus, Victoria replied. Because the day he became someone who genuinely wanted to help people instead of someone who just wanted to get rich, we all won something more valuable than money or revenge or justice. What's that? Victoria looked back toward the World Health Organization building, where hundreds of global health leaders were making plans to deploy Sterlington technology in new communities around the world. We won the chance to make sure this story helps millions of people who will never know our names, but whose lives will be better because we learned that building something meaningful together is always more powerful than destroying something alone. As they walked through the evening streets of Geneva, Victoria and David began planning their next innovation, a diagnostic system that could be built into refugee camp water systems, providing medical screening for entire communities through something as basic as drinking water. The story that had begun with theft and betrayal was continuing with innovation and hope. And somewhere in refugee camps, homeless shelters, and rural clinics around the world, millions of people were alive and healthy because two people had learned that the best revenge is to stop seeking revenge and start building something better than anything their enemies had ever imagined.